Chapter 131, second shortest chapter of all of Tehillim. There's a chapter that only have 2 verses, and this chapter has 3 verses. So it is quite short, and we'll go through it fairly quickly, but it's a great chapter to have in your back pocket. The chapter is mostly about humility, which I guess fits with the fact that it is the second to shortest chapter. Kind of humble, small, but still powerful, and an important chapter. It's one of the Shir Malices, one of the 15 Song of Ascents. In the preceding chapter, chapter 130, it was about calling out to God from the depths of exile, emphasizing the degradation that the Jewish people felt, the prayer of the downtrodden, and emphasizing that that is actually the prayer which is heard most readily. So it naturally flows into this chapter, which is about humility, because it's most easy to feel humility usually when you're in that type of situation. You can be humble when you're in power as well, as we will see King David excelled in, but it's certainly a bigger challenge. Humility is a lot more natural to feel, and requires less effort to feel when you are mimamakin, when you're calling out to God from the depths, and when you realize that you have nothing and everything comes from Hashem. The humility is more, again, just flows more freely. But David HaMelech in this chapter goes into his own personality, his own experiences, and emphasizes his humility, his almost childlike innocence and humility and trust in God, even though he is the exalted monarch. He is the leader of the Jewish people, one of the greatest leaders the Jewish people ever had. He rose to the pinnacle of power within the Jewish people, but he still always approaches his responsibilities and his relationship with God with genuine humility. In the Rambam and others stress the Torah explicitly requires a king to remain humble, so that's very fitting for David HaMelech. But David HaMelech also is not just writing this for himself to tell us about how he succeeded. He also, through his prophetic vision, sees that the Jewish people will languish in exile until they're redeemed. One of the things that need to be redeemed is to demonstrate sincere humility in the presence of the Almighty. So it's also a chapter of redemption as well. Pasuk Aleph. Shir Hamales, a song of ascents to David, to King David. Hashem loik gava libi. God, my heart is not haughty. V'lei rabu enai, and my eyes are not haughty. V'lei halachti b'gdolos u'reflois mimeni, and I have not gone, I do not aspire to things that are bigger and more wondrous than I am. So a little bit repetitive in this verse, but he's trying to convey many different messages, many different kudos, different points within this idea of his humility. Legava libi v'leiramu enai. One of the thoughts there, again, this duality of there was no haughtiness in my heart or in my eyes. So King David says, I do not harbor proud thoughts in the secrecy of my heart, nor did I look down upon others with my haughty eyes. The Medrash also says this dual phrase is interpreted as saying that I was not proud in my heart, even at the moment when when the prophet Shmuel anointed me as God's king. So you have that pinnacle of his coronation. He still did not feel the haughtiness in his heart, and his eyes were not haughty even at the moment when he destroyed the giant Goliath, which was one of the pinnacles of his military career. That's when he was relatively totally unknown, and everyone thought he was just a nobody. He was a young shepherd, and he took down the mighty giant, the hero of the Plishtim. Obviously, he could have been very, very proud of that and very haughty, but he was not, and neither of those moments. And in King David, he conquered some of the mightiest empires in the world, but somehow he managed to banish pride from his own heart. And the way he did it, our sages say, is that whenever he had an inclination to be proud and he felt that haughtiness coming up, he allowed himself to be overwhelmed by the fear and awe that he had in the presence of God. They say, as the mushal given is that, well, a fly can bother you, but when you realize that you're in a room with a lion, you don't think about the fly. So David kind of viewed his haughtiness as a fly kind of thing. Like they use it in the to talk about fear, but it's the same idea. Like, how could you think of yourself as being proud, as being someone that's accomplished something when you in the presence of God? Shivisi Hashem the be summoned, that you're always in God's presence, or you keep God in front of you at all times. Like, how can you even think of your own accomplishments when you realize that Hashem is the one who accomplishes everything? And David HaMelech, also another tool that he had to always remain humble, was he was constantly engrossed in the study of Torah. And again, that study constantly reminds us that as smart as we think we are and as accomplished as we are, our intellect is so puny in the face of the vastness of the Torah. It makes it much easier to remain humble even with vast accomplishments. And then the second half of the verse Lehalachti b'gdolos u'niflois mimeni. I did not go in things that are greater or beyond me. So the verse is saying that Donald says, I didn't pursue things that are too remote for myself. Meaning, I never aspired to build colossal palaces or the extravagant gardens, the luxuries that all the other kings he was rubbing shoulders with or defeating. He said those things, like, those are not interesting for me. They're way beyond me. I don't want them to be on there. I'm not interested in them. And another aspect of this as well, by the way, there, Doc says, is that he also, not just in a physical sense, were there things that he never aspired to. He also says in a spiritual sense, in an intellectual sense. Like, he said, Don said, there are things that are way beyond me. Meaning, I never really assume that I'll be able to comprehend the deeds of God, the ways of God, and I just humbly accept that there are things that are much too great for me to understand, and that's okay. And again, that also keeps him humble. Um, 1 second, please. Okay. Pasuk Beis, 2 out of 3. Imleshi visi v'demamti, nafshi kegamul alai imai, kegamul alai nafshi. A bunch of different interpretations in this verse that we'll talk about. The second, the general message again is that Don Malach is saying that he remains very humble, and it compares himself to a child with his mother in some ways. So again, just very humble, very unaccomplished, and unable to defend myself to succeed. So I realized that, like, it's not about me. I'm just like a child, like a baby, like an infant. Everything's from Hashem. So obviously I should be humble. So Elish imloi, if not, is kind of a weird phrase here, and it means it's more like an oath, meaning like I swear that. So, but the word imloi, which means if not, is it's a dramatic usage, kind of like implying if this is not true, then some dire but unspecified consequence should occur. So it's an expression of an oath. So Donald swears that Shivisi v'nemamti, which could be translated as I'm stilled and silenced, meaning I'm totally still. I'm as he's about to say, like a baby, like this dude over here that has nothing to say, although he looks like he has a lot to say. But he says, I'm just totally still, I have nothing to say. Another word that would be Shivisi v'nemamti. The word domem means like silent or like an inanimate object. Shivisi is a little bit hard to translate. It could mean that I'm still, but it could also mean that I'm equal, like shaveh means equal. And in this case, that would mean David Malach says that I'm equalized, meaning like it makes no difference to me whether people honor me, people insult me. I'm completely unconcerned with my own status because I know that everything comes from God. So I'm silent about it. It doesn't matter. And Shadisi, everything's the same to me because David Malach says, Nafshi kigamul alai imai kigamul alai nafshi. I'm like a child who's and there's some debate as to whether this means who's nursing from his mother or weaned from his mother. David Malach repeats this as well, like it's just repeated twice in the verse. The idea is that he's like a child that is totally dependent on the mother. So whether he's nursing and totally dependent, or whether he's weaned, he's a little bit older, 2, 3, whatever it is, and has a little bit of independence, but clearly very, very still dependent on his mother. The Malach says, like, that's what I'm like with Hashem. Like, I'm just totally dependent on Hashem. And I recognize that, and therefore I'm able to be humble. And there's also a specific incident that the Medrash connects to this pasuk, to this idea of a baby. And they explain that the idea of being a baby like the mother is, the Melech is implying like, I'm like a baby is not embarrassed to be totally naked in front of his mother. The Melech says, I'm also like that in front of Hashem. What was I referring to? When David brought the Holy Ark, the Aron HaKodesh, back to Yerushalayim after it had been rescued from the Plishtim who had captured it, so he was dancing out of boundless joy. And he danced and leaped, tumbled, and rolled in front of the ark. And as he tumbled, his garments shifted and it exposed his legs. And his wife, Michal, the daughter of King Shaul, witnessed this from her windows, and she was aghast. She considered it very undignified for the king. And she sarcastically rebuked King David and said, like, how glorious was the king of Israel on the day when he uncovered himself before the eyes of all the maidservants. But David had no regret, no apologies for his actions. And he said to his wife, he said to Michal, if I could be even less, dignified and hold myself even more lowly in the service of Hashem, I would do so. He felt that he was dancing for the honor of Hashem, and there was nothing to be ashamed of. And that was what he referred to in this verse. He's like a baby who's naked in front of his mother and isn't embarrassed to be in her arms. So too, the Malach says, I'm not ashamed to be in front of Hashem, even if I'm exposed slightly more than would have been appropriate for a king. But it's okay because he had that humility and that recognition that I'm just like a child dancing in front of his parent, and just like dancing in front of Hashem to honor him. So that's okay. And finally, Pasuk Gimel, Yachel Yisrael El Hashem, Oh, Jewish people, wait for God me'ata v'adel, now and forever. The entire Jewish nation needs to learn from, especially the when we're in exile, needs to learn from King David that political effort and military efforts do not bring about the redemption. Maybe we have an obligation to be mishtadel, to put mishtadlos, but that's not what brings the redemption. Autonomy cannot be purchased with wealth, and it cannot be earned with power. That's not how history operates with the Jewish people. If we are able to hope for Hashem, then we can be assured for the salvation that will be good for all time. And the Malach says that you have to learn that humility, like I did as well. And when you have that humility, you recognize that we're just like babies nursing, it's all from Hashem, then we'll understand, and we'll receive that goodness forever.